Welcome everyone to our Wednesday call. Let me take this off gallery view. Welcome to our Wednesday call. And today we have a very special guest speaker. Many of you know Nicholas. He's a very good friend of Sarah. He has been on the board for quite a long time now. I can't even remember. I think we met Nicholas in 2019. And so Nicholas is a very good friend of ours. He's also, a lot of you know him because he is an award-winning author on Reiki and is a Reiki master. And I know many of you have his Foundations of Reiki Ryoho book, which is a wonderful book to have. And I highly recommend it. I actually give out excerpts of this book in my level 2 and my Animal Reiki for Reiki practitioner classes. So it's a great book. But he is not here to talk about Reiki today. He is here to talk about crystals. And just really quickly before we get to him, I just want to say something. It's so funny. I was reading his, I guess it was your Amazon little bio, Nicholas, and it says, Nicholas has been immersed in all aspects of the mineral kingdom for nearly 30 years. And I'm sorry, everybody. So this just shows you how long Nicholas has been immersed with gemstones and crystals. He's barely, I mean, I know he's probably closer to 40, but it's been most of his life that he's been working with crystals. So he is the expert, in my opinion, on crystals. He's actually one of the leading voices in crystal healing today. And he offers a unique blend of science and spirituality, along with a grounded practical approach to working with crystals, which you know I love because I love practical. And then he's also regular on the metaphysical circuit, and he frequently teaches and makes appearances on podcasts and does interviews like this one. But he's written 7 books on crystals, and he just came out with one, I think it was only in the last year, Crystal Shields for Psychic Self-Defense, 145 Gemstones for Banishing, Binding, and Magical Protection, which is a great book. And now he's coming out with another book called The Witching Stones, the Lore and Craft of the Essential Crystals, Gemstones, and Minerals to Empower Your Magic. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited for that one. And he's going to talk a little bit about it with us. So Nicholas, without further delay, welcome. And thank you so much for being here. It's such an honor to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you everyone who's here, either live or catching the replay. I'm so thankful to share this space with you. A lot of you, like Leah said, will know me from my connection to the Shelter Animal Reiki Association, serving on the board of directors and teaching and doing fundraisers. But this will be a different topic for me in this kind of venue. And I think that's going to be a nice change of pace. I do want to just start out. Maybe a couple of you who are here will already know this, but I do have this new book coming out officially on October 6th in the US and November 6th in the UK. But I just got a very special care package from my publisher yesterday, and I have my early copies. So I just shipped out a whole bunch today. First 10 have already gone in the mail, and there will be even more. So this is the new book, The Witching Stones. I'll tell a little bit more of the story behind it and the kind of things you can expect from it in our talk today. But I want to kind of start with taking a step back from it all. I'll preface this by saying I am going to completely improvise today. I want to just kind of speak from the heart and be a real human who happens to love rocks with all of you here. So my journey with rocks and minerals began pretty young. This year is about 31 years of collecting now, so you can tell that my bio is slightly out of date because we write them before books come out, forgetting, of course, at least I do, that by the time it comes out, dates will have changed. So I began teaching about crystals when I was young, 20, I'm trying to do the math, 21 years ago this May was the very first time I ever taught a class to anyone in any kind of semblance of it. And it's probably one of the most consistent through lines in my life. There are a lot of things, I wear a lot of hats, and rocks are the foundation in more ways than one for everything that I do. Rocks brought me to the open door that became my spiritual practice. It helped me find Reiki. That helped me connect with this wonderful community of animal Reiki practitioners. So I'm grateful for the influence they have in my life, whether it is overt or covert. They're all around us. So One of the themes that I want to kind of bring us into dialogue with today is how connecting to rock and mineral and fossil and crystal and gemstone, all of the above, can help us have a more enchanted life. And to illustrate that, I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story. So, as Leah mentioned, we met in 2019 or so. That year was a pretty momentous year for me in a lot of ways. It was in the lead up to my currently most popular book ever coming out called Crystal Basics. It was going through editorial and doing all of that. I had an opportunity to travel up to Canada and study with Hyakuten Inamoto and learn Kumno Reiki Do. That same year, I also traveled over to the UK for the first time and spent time at Chalice Well as a facilitator for an event that friends of mine were hosting, and I taught in a handful of other locations. And one of the things that was so marvelous about this trip was how much reverence there is for the land. And I don't just mean maybe in an ecological kind of sense, but I mean like in an ancestral and cultural kind of sense. The landscape there is filled with ancient monuments, ones that are more visible and better taken care of, at least, than the monuments in my neck of the woods. Certainly, there are, prehistoric mounds and other structures left by indigenous peoples here in Central Florida. They're few and far between. They're often not celebrated. They are forgotten about. I have a friend who lives down the street from one, in a tiny little neighborhood, a county away from me. And over there, it was just such a different experience. Now, going into that, one of the kind of topics I was exploring in that retreat was getting to know the local stones sacred to that landscape, because we were doing this healing work. The topic for our event was healing the heart of the mother. So we were connecting to like the Mother Earth archetype and really seeing healing as a reciprocal process. As we heal ourselves, so we heal the earth. As we heal the earth, so we heal ourselves. And I think rocks are such a great example of that kind of work that we do. And there's just so many ways to interface with them. We can see them as inert tools, means to an ends. We can look at them through a symbolic lens. They become psychological touchstones to help us stay focused on or attentive of whatever our outcome or goal or healing uh, purpose is going to be. But they can also become allies for us. We can meet them in a way where we regard them as our teachers, our friends, our way showers. Maybe they're not living in a biological sense. I mean, they definitely aren't. But that doesn't mean they're devoid of life. There is this kind of spark of magic, this spark of soul, of essence, of something in them that has spoken to humanity for a really long time. And we're going to circle back around to that theme a little bit later. So when it comes down to it, the time that I spent over there meeting things like Cornish serpentine from the Lizard Peninsula in Cornwall, pretty much the southernmost point of the UK, um, Preseli bluestone, which I have by my side at all times. It's this funny little spotted rock that was used in the construction of Stonehenge. Things like the beautiful Rogerly fluorites from County Durham, and the incredible Blue John fluorite, which may have been mined since the Roman occupation of Britain, a millennium ago or more. It's incredible to think of this long history that people have with the stones of their own landscape. So this invited me to do two things. One, to really fall in love with British rocks specifically, because they just have a kind of a vibe, a connection, an innate link to the magic that I was experiencing there, that I was weaving together with this incredible community of folks. But it also helped me re-enchant the landscape of my homeland. It it's a conversation I was having with a colleague recently. It's kind of like the end of The Wizard of Oz, when Dorothy finds out from Glinda that she had the power to travel home the whole time, but that wouldn't have meant anything if she hadn't gone on this grand adventure, if she hadn't walked the yellow brick road and made friends and conquered enemies and faced her fears. And for me, meeting rocks of other landscapes and traveling to other sacred spaces has a similar kind of effect. helps me find the magical amidst the everyday, to be really present with what's already there that I might have overlooked. And I think in many ways, this kind of harkens to some of our core themes with the Let Animals Lead method as well, where we focus on living in the present moment. We allow our practice to be something that has flexible boundaries so we can adapt it to our needs. We view our animal friends as not just clients who are coming to us for healing, but as teachers and healers in their own right, and we respect their agency. And those kinds of praxis and principles are folded into the work that I do with rocks and minerals as well. So I had this really wonderful experience in the UK, and then, of course, COVID happens. So I write a couple of books or so, and after a certain point, started noticing the trend. I mean, I had been noticing the trend, but I really started to focus on the trend that a lot of what people needed in that kind of peak COVID era, energetically, mystically, spiritually, what people were seeking was protection, was safety, was something to help them feel comfy in their own skin in an uncertain world. And that was the impetus behind writing Crystals for Psychic Self-Defense. And I thought I knew everything I needed to know about protection work and was just going to turn out the book and call it a day. If you've followed my story, you know that's not what happened. That book took me 5 years to finish. I've never had a project take that long. Mind you, I did start it and stop it several times so I could write a couple other books, but even still, it's quite a long time for me to sit with a project. But as I was more than halfway through, we'll say generously more than halfway through, I had an idea come to me. I was working with a really humble stone. The year was 2023. I had returned to England for another retreat, this time with one of my best friends in the world, Ashley Levy, um, who's an incredible author and teacher herself. But one of the big kind of allies that showed up for us on this trip is this humble little rock here. I have a little flake that comes off of a nodule of flint. And flint comes in lots of colors. This one's kind of a slate gray, slate blue color, depending on the lighting. A lot of flint will be kind of this dark brown black color with a kind of white husk on it. If you're lucky, you can find some Polish flint that, when polished, has these beautiful ribbon-like patterns through it. So they know them as banded flints, striped flints, or ribbon flints. It takes such a high polish, but it's such an ordinary rock. We don't close our eyes and think about crystals and go, oh, Flint. Flint is my first choice. I'll tell you what, these days it's very high to my first choice for a lot of things. So after a second life-changing trip where we really got, we'll say, in the weeds with the stones of the landscape, it was something that we did for like 6 days straight with this incredible group of folks, meeting all manner of unusual rocks. Then we came home, and the magic continued to unfold. And this idea for a project came to me, and I thought to myself, "Oh, I'd really love to write that book, but I don't have any time. I have another book under contract, and it's overdue. It's really overdue. So I can't possibly start another book." And of course, I was chatting to a colleague. I was invited to contribute an essay to a kind of anthological work published by Wiser Books, and I started talking to this colleague who's an editor over there, and she said, "I would really love it if you would send me a proposal for this." And I thought, "Oh, I have something else in progress. I couldn't possibly." She's like, "Would you please?" So I did, and that became the Witching Stones. This idea about the kind of primacy of the rocks in our own landscape, of the humble, overlooked stones, and finding magic there, was so important that it became a whole book. And I'll talk a little bit more about the contents of the book later, but I want to kind of shift into some more philosophical and practical ideas before we get there. So ultimately, that's how it was born. This book was screaming out of the void to come into reality, and it's finally here. I did eventually finish Crystals for Psychic Self-Defense. Naturally, it came out in January, and then once it was done, I was just so eager to get into the witching stones, and here we are. So book number 10 is just about born. Um, some early copies going out into the world, but officially next month. So um, as I was preparing the materials for this book, I found it really imperative that I have a spectrum of stones in there. I wanted to have our stereotypical crystals, but knowing that there were only going to be 13 chapters, it kind of limited how many stones I was going to talk about. It's about one stone per chapter. There are two where I squeezed two in for reasons that become apparent when you read the book. So I knew quartz was going to be in there. I knew that emerald was going to be in there. I didn't have a choice. Emerald told me it was going to be in there. And the rest were kind of like just trying to find the middle ground. And so um, as I kind of worked through it, I thought, well, what are some really simple, practical things that I can do with each of these rocks? And so there are about 50 plus, I don't remember the final count, but there are more than 50 exercises in the book, from simple rituals and meditations to blending incenses and oils using the stones. There are safe methods for doing so in the book. To more complex kinds of practices as well, and they're rooted in folk magic, the magic of the common folk. There's inspiration from legend and lore in mythology, but at the end of the day, it's got to be practical or it's not super useful. So I'd like to introduce us to some really simple and practical things that we can do with crystals, things that we can use in whatever kind of chapter we're experiencing in life, things that might translate to support to our work with animals, perhaps, as well as things that maybe will serve as inspiration for our own creativity to take over. So, probably the most obvious things that we can do with stones that have a kind of symbolic, personal, meaningful, spiritual value is to wear them. I am rarely ever found without at least one rock or mineral on my person. So I'm wearing a little bit of sunstone around my neck, and this is actually a pendant that I got in Glastonbury. It's the image of the St. Michael's Tower on top of Glastonbury Tor, the big hill that kind of dominates that landscape, and it's so recognizable from miles and miles away. So I've got a little piece of that retreat magic with me. But I've also got some decidedly, I'll say, less exciting stones on my person at just about any time. Usually when I'm teaching about anything Reiki related or doing something Reiki related, I have some Kurama granite, just the granite that's inside Mount Kurama that traditionally is mined and used in masonry and stonework and decorative arts. I've got some other gems around my wrist, and this is a very easy way that we can incorporate crystals into our lives to infuse our lives with a little bit more magic. And we can work through any of those lenses that I talked about earlier. We can think of them as tools, catalysts to achieve a particular goal. We can think of them through the symbolic lens to help us stay focused on the goal. And we can also treat them as teachers and allies who are extending their help in more ways than one to reach that goal. So how we choose our stones can be really personal. There's more than 6,000 named mineral species as of right now, and some of those come in a lot of varieties. So, we think of quartz, and then we think of amethyst, and we think of tiger's eye, and red jasper, and carnelian, and blue chalcedony, and blue lace agate. Geologically, they are the same substance. They are one species, and that is quartz. So when we say there are more than 6,000 named mineral species, it's a little deceptive because there are lots of permutations of some of them. That number also doesn't take into account rocks. It doesn't take into account fossils. It doesn't take into account combinations. So really, the number is almost endless. That's the point I think we should take away from that. So we can choose the minerals that have meaningful symbolism or spirit to us in our practice. So when it comes to wearing crystals, a great thing that we should probably start with is cleansing our stones. We want to make sure that we're not kind of Just like we wouldn't wear yesterday's dirty socks, we probably don't want to bring yesterday's dirty vibes into today. Whatever those vibes were, they're just not today's energy. It's not about good or bad. They're just not where we want to be present. And there are lots of ways that we can cleanse crystals. If you ask 5 crystal healers the number one best way to cleanse, you're probably going to get 20 answers. I think we are all incapable of choosing just one for a lot of reasons. We can, think maybe in terms of the elements. So if we think about water, we might hold them under running water, take them to the ocean, make some consecrated water or salt water to cleanse our crystals. That's well and good for some things, but it's also harmful for others. We could think of the earth element. We might try a bit of salt. We could bury things in the earth. We can do clay baths for things that are really in need of deep cleansing. Again, great idea for some rocks, but if they're too porous or too soft, we can damage them with that method. In terms of air or wind, light some incense, use some smoke, but we can also use the breath. This is one of my favorite methods for cleansing because it's safe for all crystals. And then, let's think about that element of fire. We can symbolically include light under that. So a lot of people like to put their crystals out under a full moon. That is, of course, great when it is a full moon and when the full moon is visible. But if that's the only time we cleanse our crystals, it would be like only ever washing your dishes when the moon is full. You probably need to use your dishes more than once a month. So we need to just have more than one thing in our wheelhouse to accomplish that. We might use sunlight, we might use moonlight, we might use firelight as well. So these are, just some basic metaphors that we can come to. Cleansing is a means of helping us reset crystals to just their core self. It's kind of like Reiki as a practice of returning to our true self. It's often about letting go of the things we are not. Cleansing, therefore, is not about taking out bad energy or putting in good energy. It's allowing the crystal to return to its true self. By virtue of the structures of crystals, their crystal lattices, they have this power to remember things that we will not have. They are able to record the energies, the frequencies, the experiences with which they come into contact way better than we can. And so cleansing is just resetting them so they're no longer kind of gummed up with all of those extraneous vibes. So I'm going to teach you my favorite cleansing technique because some things can't get wet. Some are damaged by salt. Some will fade in sunlight. And sometimes it's just not a full moon. And as much as you'd like to set something on fire in the office because you are really tired of the person in the cubicle next door and their energy, we can't always do that either. But we always have our breath. So if you have a crystal, a rock, a mineral, a fossil, a piece of jewelry that you'd like to cleanse, go ahead and pick one up and we'll practice this together. I'm going to use this little piece of quartz here. So without a whole lot of pomp and ceremony to it, all we really need is focus behind our intention and good breathing skills. So let's close our eyes for a moment and just take a couple of gentle, relaxing breaths. And let's set our intention to cleanse our crystal. And now I'm going to invite you to choose a symbol of cleansing. You might just think of white light. Maybe you'll think of a fresh breeze on your face, the sound of the ocean, the scent of clean laundry, any kind of sensory input that triggers that idea of freshness, of cleanliness, of rejuvenation. Pick that. And what we're going to do is as we inhale, we're going to imagine drawing in that intention, that energy of cleansing. And as you exhale, just release anything that stands in the way of that energy of cleansing. Breathing in that purity, that freshness, that return to the true self. Breathing out any obstacles. once we feel really at ease and comfortable with this theme, this intention, now we are going to cleanse our crystal. So you can hold it in one or both hands, however is comfortable for you. There's, lots of varying ideas that you must hold it in a particular way. We're just gonna let go of attachment to that. But I like to hold it kind of in my eye line. So, I'll turn a little bit so you can see that. Mentally connect to the crystal. That can be as simple as looking at it. That's a really good way to focus our attention. And then we're going to take a nice deep cleansing breath and release it in a short and sharp pulse through the nose. If you feel like you didn't quite cleanse it enough, just trust your instincts. You can turn it and flip it to another face or another side and repeat. Trusting that the breath is carrying our intention, our life force, our chi, our prana, whatever we want to call that, into the crystal. And when we're done, we can just hold it for a moment, maybe in one or both hands or against the heart, and just focus on gratitude. Gratitude that you have this ally, this teacher, this presence in your life. And now you have a freshly cleansed crystal. So this could be something that we set on the desk. This could be something that goes in the pocket. We could do this, with our bracelet before we pop it on and leave for the day. So lots of ways that we can incorporate a simple practice like this into our lives. Of course, as Reiki practitioners, we could think about the breath in terms of things like kokiho, the exhalation method, sending Reiki with the breath. We could think about our visual focus through the terms of gyoshiho, sending Reiki through the eyes. We could, incorporate symbols or mantras. We could get really ritualized about it. We can also have that simple folk practice. Both are going to be equally as effective. Um, so cleansing is a great way to get started. The next thing we want to think about is when it comes to pairing the right crystal for the right job, it is very personal. We want to do two things. One is to give ourselves agency to pick because we know best. You know you better than I know you. I get so many people who come to me and say, "What's the best crystal for blank?" Like, well, for me it might be this, but for you, I don't know. Let's talk some more. Um, so really trust your instincts. Trust that you're going to be intuitively drawn to the right crystal. Of course, consult with books. I write crystal books. I do hope people read crystal books. Otherwise, I won't be able to keep writing them. But especially with like my little pocket encyclopedia, which is all of this big, there's only so much I can put in there about one stone. So, let's say you look up emerald in there, it's maybe 10 lines of text altogether. If you look up emerald in here, it's, I don't know, like 15 pages. So naturally, I had to leave something out. If I squeezed, 10 or 15 pages into this book, all of this right here, this section is just emerald. Then I couldn't say all of those things in 10 lines. So when we read descriptions of things on the little cards in the shops or in crystal books, remember that's like something's resume, it's the CV. You can't tell your whole life story in a 3x5 card or less. We can't expect the same for rocks. So there's always more to them than meets the eye, and trust that some part of you recognizes that. The other thing we want to do is ask good questions. So this, I think, is kind of the crux of so much of our spiritual work in general, especially when we use other tools for healing, whether that is color therapy, aromatherapy, flower essence therapy, crystal therapy, so on and so forth. It's not just asking the surface level prescriptive question, what crystal is good for love? I mean, I could probably name 50. That's not productive. It would be overwhelming. The better question is to ask yourself, what is my biggest roadblock to blank? So if it's love, what is it that I find to be my stumbling block for love? And where do I think that comes from? And as we think about those kinds of questions, then we suddenly get more context. maybe it's not, oh, I need a crystal that brings more loving energy into my life. Maybe it's, I need a crystal that helps me separate my romantic life from my work life because I put too much energy here and have nothing left over for this. You could give me all the love in the world, and if I don't have time for you, I don't have time for you. Maybe it's, oh, I never had a good model of love growing up, and I kind of project that onto everything that's happening. I expect things to go bad. Again, could bring all of the love into your life that's possible, but if you don't know how to receive that, it doesn't matter. So asking the right questions is going to open new doors for you. And that's going to empower you to find the right crystal for that. Thinking big picture, thinking holistically, thinking about how our end goal is kind of located in the context of our whole lives is important. So, so many people ask me what's a good stone for healing. So occasionally I still do this, but not very often. I work for one of our local crystal shops here in Orlando. Mostly I help them source things. I write for their newsletter. I do other stuff. But about once a month, I still get in there and actually get to help people. And, which crystals for healing is my favorite question and also my least favorite question, because then I get to just be Vanna White for a moment and say, all of them. But let's be more specific, because the crystal that's going to help you heal your relationship with money is a very different one than the one that's going to help you heal a broken heart. So we have to really identify what are our goals and what is the context for those kinds of goals. How can we really navigate that? And then we can start comparing and contrasting crystals. Then you can, flip through the pocket encyclopedia or your favorite blog or, anywhere else that you find descriptions of crystals and 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 see, oh, this love crystal versus that love crystal, this healing crystal versus that healing crystal. It's so important that we give ourselves permission to really fine tune those questions, and that we sit with the uncomfortable parts of it too. Those are often where the healing opportunity comes through. So um, the next part of that is, how do we collaborate with crystals? How do we invite them into our lives in more than just a passive kind of way? Like I mentioned, the easiest thing we can do, wear or carry our crystals, or maybe place them in their environment. If I can't, the camera is part of the computer. Otherwise, I would show you my desk. It's probably good that I can't embarrass myself this way. I brought a few extra crystals over that don't normally live on my desk. I don't always have something this large here. But certainly I have more than I can pick up in my two hands. So we can use them environmentally as well. But the point is, just placing something in your environment is insufficient. Just wearing it around your neck is insufficient. Something is happening. I wholeheartedly believe that. But there's so much more to our practice when we allow it to be relational. And this is what those journeys into the sacred landscape have inspired in me. Building a relational practice with my stones. That means not just saying, hey, you over there, do this thing for me. It means when you get a new stone, sitting with it quietly, observing, receiving, giving. A really powerful question you can ask your crystals is, what can I do for you? And you'd be surprised, we might think in words, whatever our internal dialogue speaks in. We might not get an answer that way. It might come as an inner knowing, a flash of insight, just a gut instinct. But you might hold that piece of amethyst you keep on the sunny windowsill and go, what do you need from me? And that amethyst goes, move me. I fade in the sunlight. Okay, let's get you away from that sunny windowsill. Or maybe you just get the idea that something needs a deeper cleanse, or that something would really love to get out of the house or be moved into a different room or be a part of your life in a different way. And other times the answer is nothing at all. That crystal is more than content to just sit in that bowl or in that drawer or in the box until the next time you want to work together. So this relational attitude is, for me, the foundation of stone magic, of not just healing, but this truly ancient relationship that we have with crystals. It goes back to the beginning of humankind. So in the book, I talk about some really compelling archaeological evidence. Um, One of those examples is one I've written about before in a couple other books, talking about these kinds of fossils called echinoids, fossil sea urchins. They usually have a little five-pointed star. I don't know how well this is going to show up on camera, but I've got a little one here. This is actually one I found not super well, but there's this little star-like shape on it. Um, this might be a better choice. So almost looks like a little flower. If you turn it the other way, then it's shaped like us, our head, our arms, our legs. The oldest archaeological evidence for symbolic use of this particular stone is upwards of 450,000 years ago. So that means we are approaching 500,000 years of human mineral relationship. And it just sounds like someone might have unmuted by accident. If we can just make sure we mute for the quality of the recording. Thank you. That means we've been thinking symbolically and relationally with stones for longer than Homo sapiens. That puts things around Homo habilis, Homo erectus. The earliest archaeological evidence that we have of human and quartz crystal, thinking symbolically about them at least, is, I think, well over 120,000 years. Well over. And that evidence shows that they were traded across distances, that people were buried with them intentionally, that people were viewing them not just as inert, beautiful things, but as collaborators in life. And this stems from an inherently inspirited view of the landscape, but also the world at large. One of the things that I think we can be inspired by, a little crossover between our Reiki practice, we have in what precious few writings we have directly from Usui Sensei. He tells us in the Kokai Denju Setsumeisho, the explanation of open teachings or public teachings, that everything in the universe without exception possesses Reiki. That means, of course, us, but every other living thing and every other thing that we might not view as living, including crystals. If Reiki, if one way we might translate that expression, as those of you who know me and my Reiki practice know, it's complicated. We can't really render it very nicely and neatly in a single succinct phrase, which is why we use a gloss like universal life force. But one way that we might poetically render Reiki, which could be an accurate translation, is soul energy. In other words, the phenomena of being inspirited, of possessing some kind of consciousness or spark of life. If everything in the universe possesses that, that means stones do as well. And humans, hominids before Homo sapiens, knew this and acted accordingly. So, meeting our stones as teachers, inviting their magic into our lives, and inviting our lives into their magic is a really powerful act. If you get no other takeaway other than cleansing is good and working with stones doesn't have to be complicated, then I hope it will be, let them be your teachers, let them be your guides, your allies, and that's where the real magic is going to happen. So I want to be mindful of time, so I'd like to start some Q&A shortly. But before we do, I want to give you a very special preview from the Witching Stones. I did a little bit of this on Instagram last night, so if you might have caught that, I apologize. I'm going to repeat myself. But I will narrate a little bit of the introduction of the book, which is titled Magic in the Earth. The witching stones are magic embodied. They are the tools for casting spells and carrying out rituals to commune with gods and spirits. They are part and parcel of the witch's cabinet, the materia magica of the secret art. The witching stones are many things. They are common rocks, like flint and chalk. They are also the formed stones or fossils whose seemingly impossible shapes resemble living things. Some of the witching stones are valuable materials of mineral origin, like salt and lead, that have driven industries for countless generations. They can be rocks with miraculous powers and supernatural appearances, like magnetic lodestone or the cruciform chiastolite. and they are precious gems like emerald and rock crystal, whose powers have been coveted since their discovery. On the nature of stones. What is a stone? The word conjures images of mountainous peaks, otherworldly caves, pebbles on the beach, and colorful gems. In the modern lexicon, a stone is a discrete piece of rock or mineral. The word usually carries the connotation of something being shaped or influenced by human hands, such as stone tools, standing stones, and gemstones. The word stone is truly ancient, with direct cognates that have connoted hard fragments of the Earth's crust for millennia. Ultimately, it derives from a Proto-Indo-European root that means to harden or to congeal. There is a wisdom in this root, as all stone begins as molten rock, which stiffens as it cools. Science today prefers more discrete categories than simply stone. Words like rock and mineral denote much more tangible categories of substances. A mineral is a naturally occurring crystalline substance. It has a regular composition and a stable repeating structure. Minerals are made out of elements on the periodic table, and each one has its identifying physical, optical, and chemical properties. There are more than 6,000 species of mineral that have been identified so far. Quartz, halite, calcite, and beryl are examples of minerals that you may already know. A rock has a variable composition, texture, and appearance. It is made of one or more minerals with lots of crystalline textures jumbled together. Rocks are classified by origin and composition. They tell stories about the processes that shape the world around us. After solidifying from a molten state, rocks can be broken down and recombined, eroded and transported, superheated and subjected to pressure to result in new rocks and their constituent minerals. In the pre-modern world, there was not much distinction in categories of stone. Largely, they were considered synonymous with rocks, minerals, fossils, the latter being a Latin fossilis, meaning something obtained by digging. The most important dichotomy classified stones as either precious or common. These groupings had malleable boundaries. They do not resemble the designations of precious, semi-precious, and non-precious used by gemologists today. Rather, a stone was precious by how it was perceived, not just in terms of its beauty or rarity, but by the agency it exerted. The actions performed by stones, that is to say, their magical properties, were called virtutes, Latin for virtues. Author and professor of art history Brigitte Büttner tells us that the concept of virtues was so important that the authors of Lapidaries took it as an ontological benchmark. Stones endowed with powers were precious, no matter how striking or dull they looked. Those devoid of action were mere clumps of earth. I believe that no stone is without its virtue or bereft of magic. Each one carries the potential to weave magic into everyday life. Stone is our foundation, the bedrock on which human life is built. It paves the streets and forms our walls. It's in our medicine, food, and fuel. Stone is all around us, though it is often disguised by being transformed into concrete and wire, asphalt and glass. Life depends on stone, and it has always been enriched and informed by it. Stones are the bones of the earth, the firstborn of material forms on our planet. They are the eldest raised, the oldest matter, the wisest children of the gods. In short, stones are magic.
I love that, Nicholas. I love that stones are the bones of the earth. That's really cool.
Thank you.
Thank you for reading that. Oh my gosh, that was so interesting, and I'm so excited for this book to come out. So thank you for being so generous to give all of us a sneak preview to that. I want to get to some of these questions first, and let me just make sure that I get up yeah, here we go. So Rita wanted to know, how often do you like to cleanse the crystal that you're using and wearing? And I think you said daily, right?
So when it comes to my like everyday kinds of stones, if I'm wearing it around, it's getting a gentle cleansing through one method or another. Preferably, a light cleanse overnight and then probably a deeper cleanse once a week. So, there are lots of ways we can accomplish that. Any of my books will have some detailed instructions. You can adapt that. The crystals that are in my office, there are two human people who frequent my office, myself and my husband. I like our energy. Um, I don't have a choice, right? I better like my own energy. Um, so I probably cleanse these stones less frequently, maybe once a week, every other week when I cleanse the rest of the house. But your mileage may vary. If I had a desk in an office and the vibes were immaculate there, I might not feel the need to do it except every so often. If I had a desk in an office with rocks all over it and maybe the mojo wasn't so great, I'd probably cleanse more often. So, you can find the rhythm that works for you, but you can't hurt anything by cleansing more than you think you need to.
And can you use sage to cleanse, Nicholas?
Yeah, so you can use all manner of botanicals, sage, let's try that again, sage, cedar, frankincense, copal resin, juniper. I mean, pick a botanical. It's probably got some kind of ceremonial ritual use used in cleansing or blessing, and it'll be a good one to go. I prefer like natural botanicals over the artificially scented incense, but if that's all you got, smoke itself is a transformation of one substance into another, and we can symbolically transform the energies of our space and our tools with it as well.
Oh, I love that. And then Sharon wants to know if you could speak about Usui charging quartz crystals with Reiki and sending them to people he couldn't meet with in person.
So the origin of this comes from a gentleman by the name of Ogawa Fumio, who's the adoptive son of a direct student of Usui, Ogawa Kozo. And the senior Ogawa sensei apparently learned to perform Reiju on quartz crystal spheres directly from Usui, and he continued that practice. And Frank Arjava Petter learned this from the younger Ogawa Fumio sensei. With the help of one of his students back in the 90s when he was doing his kind of initial round of research. I have really not seen very much else except that which comes from Arjava about this, with one other notice that comes in a single, maybe a two-line mention about Hayashi Sensei doing something similar in his Kenkyu Sho. So before Hayashi left the Usui Reiki Society, the Usui Reiki Ryoho Gakkai. He operated a research center that was an extension of a branch of the Gakkai called the Hayashi Reiki Kenkyusho, or the Hayashi Reiki Research Center. And allegedly, at some point in that research center, he would use quartz crystal spheres about the size of a marble in his practice. So we have very little, we have no primary documents. We only have secondary ones in the form of transcribed interviews. But this is a practice that I am really fascinated by, and I have devoted pretty much a whole chapter to this topic in my new book, which will be out hopefully sometime in 2027, called Reiki Rituals, Healing and Transformation Through Embodied Practice.
Thank you for that. And then Rita wanted to know if you know of a good source for Mount Karama stone bracelets ethically sourced, because she's not going to be traveling to Japan anytime soon.
Unfortunately, my source has dried up. So I had connected with someone whose like whole business model was native Japanese rocks in the kind of the appropriately enough, the word most Japanese people use, the expression most Japanese people use to describe crystal healing is the English expression in Japanese katakana, so it's spelled out phonetically, power stone. So like this would be power stone bracelet, buresureto in Japanese. And I think the Kurama granite was too difficult for her to continue getting ethically, and so she hasn't really re-upped on her supply. I am grateful that back in 2021, I think it was, I bought one for myself, but I also have a couple ounces, maybe about 3 ounces left of small tumbles. I gifted one to Leah of this Kudama granite, and I give it to all of my Shimpiden students as well. So um, it's a really precious substance. Unfortunately, The like mining and stoneworking industry of Kurama is kind of a dying art form. So I imagine that is part of the problem with sourcing this material.
Thank you. And then both Charisse and I think it was T had a question about, so T's was more about what is psychic protection, and Charisse was asking, in especially the let animals lead method of animal Reiki, we're open and we don't really talk about protection because when you're open, we don't feel like you need it. But how would crystals work into that? And then if you could, like the second phase of that, what is psychic protection when we work
Sure.
with crystals?
Let's start with that second piece first. What do we mean when we talk about psychic protection, psychic self-defense? Um, I I think I want to start this by stating something that I hope is obvious. Two things, but two things that sound contradictory at first until we kind of hold space for the nuance. The first is that I believe in a fundamentally good universe. There's no qualifier on that. I do. I believe in a genuinely, sincerely, fundamentally, there is goodness in the universe. Human beings, however, have a tendency to forget that and to act otherwise. And the impetus behind any kind of protection work that we do, I think historically might look different to how we might approach it in the context of, for example, the Let Animals Lead method. But ultimately, protecting ourselves is a practice that enables our light to shine. We can think of protection in the kind of limiting relative terms. I am enveloping myself in a boundary. I am keeping that energy out. I am stopping this vibe at the door. And that is a helpful metaphor, but I don't actually think that's necessarily what's happening. I think another way we can embrace the concept of psychic self-defense is maybe through the metaphor of raising our consciousness, shining our bright so lightly, uh, our light so brightly that other things just can't get through. Um, you know, Darkness doesn't cast out light, it's the other way around. If you're in the dark and you don't want the dark to get you, you don't wrap yourself in more dark, you turn on the light. And that other phenomenon, we're not even going to call it a discrete substance because it's the absence of something, right? But that absence is filled. So, in terms of how crystals might support us in the Let Animals Eat method, of course, remembering that we don't mix modalities necessarily in the Let Animals Eat method of animal Reiki, but I am a big proponent of leveraging the tools that help you show up as your whole self. So for me, a really great example, I'm wearing it right now on my wrist, is labradorite. Labradorite is just one of those stones that's innately magical. I just imagine like if 10,000 years ago people had found a deposit of this, we'd have a whole lot of folklore about it. We don't really, unfortunately, because it's in the grand scheme of things, a fairly recent discovery. But from one angle, it's dull and lifeless. From another, it creates this kind of hologram of color within. It's not got any pigment that produces that color. It's actually a kind of structural phenomenon. The light passing between the layers gets scrambled and kind of broken open. And that's kind of how I visualize it helping me protect myself. It's not about blocking things out, reflecting only this color. It's about letting my light shine to its full potential, showing the full spectrum that I am. And if I do that, what do I have to worry about? And that's kind of like how Reiki gets around that need for protection. Reiki with a capital R, Reiki the practice, Reiki the system. When I say that, we don't need protection because when you're one with the universe, there's nothing greater than that. And crystals can help us remember that innate oneness with the universe because they never forgot it. We did because we're human. Um, but that's maybe one way we can contextualize that conversation. But for anyone who wants some more like concrete practices, you can check out the book Crystals for Psychic Self-Defense. Came out earlier this year in January. There's everything from like crystals to wear to grids and layouts that you can do for yourself or around your home, and lots more practices in there too.
So we have lots of comments about Denise asked, can you read the whole book? And Cara said yes. And then Karen O'Sullivan said, you are so poetic and informational in your writing, Nicholas. And that is so true. And then we have time for like one more question. So Linda had to leave early. Karen said, thank you so much for reading the excerpt from your book. Hearing your words in your own voice is a really wonderful experience. And then Cara wanted to know if we carry pieces of selenite in the pocket along with other pocket crystals, is that a way to present to the crystal in care? Oh, is that a way to be present to the crystal in care and respect of them?
I'd probably need some clarification on what we mean by this. I anticipate, and please forgive me if my interpretation is wrong, that we might be referring to selenite and its cleansing ability. But and if that's not so, please feel free to chime in the chat there. But I personally do not subscribe to the theory that there is no crystal that never needs to be cleansed or cleared, because I've never met a human being who also never needs to have their hands washed or their hair shampooed. So energetically, it's kind of the same metaphor. How this started is a complicated game of telephone and a misinterpretation of some early 90s literature. We won't unpack that whole journey. I do think that selenite has maybe a faster energy metabolism than some other stones, but particularly if we're talking about the porous variety of satin spar selenite like this, it grabs onto a lot of energy very quickly. And my experience is that particularly when we're putting it to work often, it needs more cleansing than other stones, like a sponge needs more cleansing. The idea that we use selenite to cleanse other crystals is similar to the idea that we use a sponge to wash our dishes, but if you never wash your sponge, your dishes are no longer clean. So selenite also needs cleansing. But if we mean something else in that context, feel free to expound upon that in the comments. I think if maybe referring to the softness of selenite, you want to make sure that you're just taking care of it. You can, if you've got more than one pocket stone, you can wrap it in something, put it in a small pouch, and protect it from being damaged. Selenite has a hardness of 2 on the hardness scale. Your fingernails have 2.5 hardness, so you can actually scrape it and produce pixie dust that way. So if you put it in your pocket with another rock, it might be damaging them. So if that's what you meant, wrapping it is an easy turnaround there. But I'll wait and see if we get
Well, I know we
anything.
have a lot of questions, but we're coming to time now, Nicholas. So do you have any classes coming up on crystals?
I do. So if you would like to check out my calendar of events, let me just go ahead and pop my link tree here in the chat for everyone. This has an overview of some of my brand new events coming up. I've got a class next Thursday to actually celebrate the launch of the Witching Stones. I'll go over some hands-on practices. It's hybrid, so you can be there in person in Massachusetts with me or take it online and get the replay. I've got some other great events coming up in the very near future as well. And so much is always happening in my life. I'm fairly busy. If you're local to Central Florida, I will have a few in-person events, including a free curator's talk and gallery opening at my day job. I essentially curate the largest rock and mineral collection in the southeastern US at Stetson University. And so yeah, there's so much happening. And for those of you who might be interested in learning Reiki with me, I'll just pop this link in there. I do have a 3rd degree seminar coming up. It's a 3-day intensive, and that will be on the 19th through the 21st. Yeah, that math work checks out, I think. 19th through the 21st. So just a week from this weekend.
Nice, wonderful. And Nicholas is such an amazing teacher. So if you can sign up for the Thursday class, and I think I already did sign up for that. I'm not going to be able to be there live, but I'm super excited. It was really low price, but a great opportunity. And Nicholas is so generous with his time. So thank you so much for coming and talking to us, Nicholas, and sharing. I learned so much in this free hour, and I cannot wait for your new book to come out. And all of Nicholas's books are fabulous. So I really encourage you. You can go on Amazon or I think Goodreads and Barnes and Noble. They all have it. And you're getting lots of nice comments in the chat. Rebecca says such an amazing and valuable talk today. Joy said, thank you, Nicholas. So thank you so much, Nicholas. Thank you too to all of you who came and supported Nicholas in this talk. And we really appreciate that. So Nick, and you know what? All of the links that Nicholas is sharing in chat, we'll be sure to put in the recap email. And don't forget to sign up for Nicholas's email. We'll put a link to that as well, because Nicholas is always, promoting. He has a free Reiki share every month, so you can get to know him a little better through his Reiki shares. I think you do ask for a donation if possible. But if you can't donate, they are for free. And then you can get a list of all of his classes coming up, because that's how I found out about your class on Thursday. So thank you, Nicholas. I don't know if you have any last closing words before we have to go.
Well, thank you all for spending some time with me. I know we didn't get to all of the questions and comments, so I popped my email in the chat. It's Nicholas at the Luminous Pearl. Feel free to email me. I do my best to be as timely as I can. Sometimes there's a little delay when I've got a lot of projects or if I'm traveling, but I'd be happy to steer you in the right direction.
Thank you, Nicholas. And thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful Tuesday. Bye.